They sat me behind a velvet curtain. I watched my only son receive a standing ovation through a gap meant for servers to carry trays. I paid for that retirement ceremony. The catering, the engraved plaque, even the slideshow set to his favorite Coldplay song. But when the applause started, when his wife wiped a fake tear and kissed his cheek like she'd carried him through everything, I wasn't there. Not on stage. Not at the family table. Not in the photos. Just a folding chair behind a curtain next to a half-eaten cheese tray holding a program that spelled my name wrong. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're watching from. And if this story speaks to your heart, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow I've got something truly special waiting just for you. And I stayed quiet, smiled, even clapped, until I saw what they'd really done. Until the truth came out, not just about how they saw me, but who my son really was. That night, I didn't just cancel the after-party, I cancelled the lie. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about a mother who outlived her usefulness, and what happened when she decided she wasn't going to be useful anymore. She was going to be remembered. They say there's no sound when something breaks inside you. But I remember exactly how it felt. It was quiet, like when a wine glass tips in the sink and chips perfectly. No shatter, just less than it was before, forever. That was me the day of Nate's retirement ceremony. But the break didn't happen that day. It began years earlier, in ways so small I didn't even feel them happening. Until I was sitting behind a curtain, watching my son's legacy be celebrated without me in it. Suddenly, my memory goes back to when he was 4, scarlet with fever, bundled in towels because I couldn't afford a second blanket. The apartment reeked of boiled rice and dollar store bleach. Thomas had left months earlier. Left behind a box of records, a stack of excuses, and a toddler who clung to my leg every time I put on my shoes. That night, Nate could barely breathe. I sat on the edge of our mattress on the floor, no bed frame, pressing a cool cloth to his temple and whispering, "One day, baby, they'll clap for you." He looked up with swollen eyes and nodded, like he already knew he'd owe me something. But here's what no one tells you about motherhood. You don't keep receipts. You give everything and expect nothing. And somehow that expectation becomes your prison. There's a Buddhist teaching. You lose nothing by giving unless you forget that you too are sacred. I forgot. Or maybe I never knew. I became a vessel, not a woman, not Evelyn, just Nate's mum. I was praised for being selfless, but it was the kind of praise you give to doormats. Useful, stepped on, never seen. And I played my part. Worked night shifts at the hospital, folded hotel laundry at dawn, missed birthdays, lost sleep, skipped meals. But I never missed a payment. Nate's face was on the retirement banners. Decorated officer, 30 years of service, loyal husband, family man. But when he was 22, he was inches from the grave. The call came at 3 a.m., his voice slurred, scared. I found him on the floor of his apartment surrounded by vodka bottles, pay stubs, and unopened eviction letters. He didn't want anyone to know. Not Camille, who will be his future wife. Not his job. So I emptied my retirement fund every last cent and checked him into a private treatment center. Quietly. Without ceremony. 6 weeks later, he came back clean. I bought him new clothes, helped him find work again. He never spoke of it again. But I did get a thank you. A candle. Lavender. I'm allergic. There's a term in elderly psychology called backgrounding. It's when aging caregivers, especially women, are emotionally sidelined, kept close enough to be useful, far enough to be invisible. That's what we become after 60 background characters in the lives we built from scratch. You're allowed in the room, but not at the table. You're spoken of, but not spoken to. You become a symbol of strength, until your presence clashes with the aesthetic. So when I walked into Nate's retirement celebration and saw that the program misspelled my name, Evelyn Hart, two N's no bio, I didn't cry. I took out my pen, circled it, underlined it twice, not to fix it, to witness it, because somewhere along the way they renamed me without asking. Helper, donor, ghost. But that morning, as the music played and the room applauded, I felt something shift in my chest. A voice I hadn't heard in decades whispered, "You are not a backdrop. You are the mother." The origin story, the storm and the shelter. And I decided I would never sit silently in the shadows again. They didn't call it a mistake. They didn't call it anything. They just smiled and moved me behind the curtain. It was a velvet divider, deep blue, strung across the back of the event hall, the kind they use to hide sound equipment or kitchen trays. I stood there, holding my clutch, staring at the man with the headset, some 20-something in loafers, and fear. He blinked hard when he saw me. "Oh, Ms. Hart, we've got a special seat for you just over here. More private, behind catering. It'll be more comfortable." Comfortable. For who I followed him past the family tables. Camille's mother, shimmering in navy silk, caught my eye and looked away like she didn't recognize me. The table with the Hart's nameplate set for 6. All her family, not me. I was escorted behind the curtain and seated next to a bucket of ice and a half-unwrapped cheese tray. The folding chair wobbled. There was no name tag, just a paper napkin, with someone else's lipstick stain on it. "It's the theme," the young man stammered when I didn't sit right away. "Navy and silver. We're coordinating for the official photos." I was wearing cream, a modest hand-pressed blouse I'd bought just for the occasion, a touch of lace, something I thought Camille might call elegant. Apparently it wasn't on brand. I sat, slowly. My knees ached, my hands trembled, but not from sadness, from understanding. Psychologists call this affectionate marginalization. It's when older adults, especially women, are praised in theory but excluded in practice. You're loved, as long as you don't disrupt the illusion. You're honored, as long as you don't ask to be seen. And when you're finally inconvenient, you're rebranded as a disruption to flow. They won't say, "We don't want you in the photos." They'll say, "We're trying to keep things cohesive." They won't say, "You're too old." They'll say, "Let the young people take center stage." There's a saying from the Dhammapada, "You yourself deserve your love and affection as much as anyone in the universe." I used to think compassion meant stepping back, staying out of the frame, letting others shine. But that day behind the curtain, I realized you can't teach people to see you by disappearing first. I peeked through the slit in the curtain. There they were. Nate, Camille, her parents, her sister's husband, the baby I'd held when Camille had postpartum shakes and needed to sleep. All of them, laughing, toasting, crying. Someone placed a serving tray on the edge of my table, mistaking me for a server. I didn't move it. I just stared at the photograph on the centerpiece, a collage of Nate's life. There he was, as a baby. There he was at his college graduation, his wedding, his first promotion. I took every photo in that collage. I wasn't in a single one. And then I saw it, a photo from his white coat ceremony. Medical school. I remembered it like yesterday. He was so nervous he forgot to tie his shoes. I'd taken that photo. He'd hugged me right after. But in this version, I was cropped out, digitally smoothed away, replaced by a blur of grey. Not even a memory. Just a shape they decided didn't fit the mood board. I stared down at my lap. My hands still held the crumpled program with my name spelled wrong, Evelyn Hart. I had built the foundation, painted the walls, held up the roof, and they gave me a folding chair behind a curtain. So I wouldn't ruin the photo. They didn't forget me. They removed me. Gratitude has a taste. It's bitter, especially when it's gone stale, especially when you realize it was never on the menu. They toasted Nate that night like he'd built himself from scratch, like no one had scraped their knees to carry him there. They toasted Camille's parents for their support and hospitality. They toasted his mentor, his commanding officer, the caterer, the event planner, the DJ. But no one raised a glass to the woman behind the curtain, the one who paid the bill. When I got back to my hotel, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop. The spreadsheet was still there, color-coded, tidy, perfect. I'd built it over 14 months, line by line, every deposit, every receipt, every charge. I never expected to be thanked, but I also never expected to be deleted. $6, $200 to the venue. $3, $100 for catering. $850 for the custom step-and-repeat banner with Nate's face printed across it like a campaign ad. $150 for Camille's designer heels. I didn't know they were charging that to me until later. I clicked to the last tab. One labeled Private Gifts Expenses I'd never told anyone about. Camille's dress, $1 and $300. The retirement scrapbook, $420. The photographer, $2 and $200. The floral arch, $975. A custom whiskey barrel engraved with Nate Hart, 30 years strong, $100. That one hurt the most. He never mentioned it, never touched it. Camille's father had accepted it on his behalf during the toast, as if he had ordered it. I wasn't even looking for it. I was searching for an invoice when I saw it. An email thread, forwarded to me by accident, from Camille's mother to Camille and Nate. Subject line, seating adjustments, plus. Family branding, I clicked, and read. We'll keep Evelyn out of the front photos. She's lovely, but just not quite on brand for the theme. It'll distract from the clean family narrative. Plus, I think Nate's a little embarrassed about her. He never says it, but you can tell. I froze. Not because it shocked me, but because it didn't. I scrolled further. Let's just keep her in the back near catering. It's easier. We can call it an event flow issue. Nate can smooth it over if needed. She's harmless. She won't push back. Harmless. It was like being stabbed with a velvet knife. There's a subtle kind of cruelty that gets masked as politeness. In aging psychology, it's called perceived irrelevance. The moment people stop seeing you as dangerous, they stop treating you like a person. You become safe, silent, disposable. Buddhist teachings warn about the illusion of permanence, the belief that our place in others' lives is fixed. But nothing is fixed. Not love, not loyalty, not memory, especially not in curated family events. That same night, while hate scrolling through Camille's social media, I found it. A screenshot someone had posted in a story. A Venmo transaction from Camille to her bridesmaid. Captioned, "Spa day on the MIL's dime." He says she's covering everything anyway. Might as well go big. There it was. Casual. Careless. Like I was a gift card. Like I didn't notice when my account balance dropped $1,700 in 2 days. That night I didn't eat. Not out of sadness. Out of nausea. The nausea that comes when clarity finally rots through denial. And in that sterile hotel room, under 2 white light and a buzzing mini-fridge, I felt something ancient and cold inside me whisper, "They don't think you matter. Because you never asked them to." And for the first time in my life, I planned to ask, not with words, but with absence. The morning after the ceremony, I couldn't sleep. I wandered my house like a stranger in a museum of sacrifices. The framed photo of Nate's high school graduation, The diploma I paid for in full. The couch where I slept for 2 years so he could have the only bed. I opened a drawer in my bedroom, looking for nothing. But something found me. An envelope, yellowed, postmarked from Arizona, addressed in a shaky, familiar hand. Thomas, my ex-husband, dead 12 years, but still managing to hurt me. I opened it, and the world rearranged itself in 5 sentences. Evelyn, you never wanted to hear from me again, and I can't blame you, but there's something I need to tell you before I go. Nate isn't biologically yours. He was from a woman I was seeing before we got serious. She left him with me. I never told you. I was afraid you'd leave, and I wasn't man enough to raise him alone. You didn't know. You never knew. I let you believe he was ours. I'm sorry. The silence that followed was louder than any scream I'd ever swallowed. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt the world tilt. Was he mine? Wasn't he? A voice in my chest whispered what I'd known for years, but never dared speak. You don't become a mother by blood. You become one by staying. In Buddhism, there's a teaching. Attachment to form is the root of suffering. What you nurture with intention becomes real. So, what does it mean if the child you fed, bathed, clothed, defended was never yours by blood? It means you did it anyway. It means you chose love when love didn't owe you anything. And that is the truest form of motherhood there is. In elderly trauma therapy, there's a term, legacy collapse. It happens when the narrative you built your life around crumbles in late life. Everything you thought gave you meaning suddenly becomes unstable. That was me. I had built my identity on being Nate's mother, and now I was just a stranger with the same last name. But here's the twist. Here's the fury that rose from the ashes. I was still the one who stayed. Still the one who scrubbed vomit off bathroom tiles. Still the one who begged banks for loan extensions and lied about needing glasses because his asthma meds cost too much. So what now? I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't devastated, but because I'd already done my grieving in real time for years. Every time I was overlooked. Every time I was erased. Every time Camille's family was called his real family. That letter didn't break me. It clarified me. I wasn't his mother. I had become his mother. And I had done it better than anyone else ever would. So I sat at my kitchen table, letter in one hand, spreadsheet in the other, and made a decision. I wasn't going to fight for a seat at a table that only served illusions. Let them toast each other. Let them post pictures. Let them pretend I was a ghost. I would disappear? Yes. But not with shame, with power. Because when you stop begging for acknowledgement, you start demanding truth, even if it burns down everything you once protected. It was a few days after the retirement ceremony. I was cleaning not because I cared, but because I couldn't sit still in a house full of ghosts. The photos were gone, packed in boxes. The fridge was empty. The bed still untouched on one side. Then I opened the guest room dresser, the drawer with the crooked runner that always stuck. Inside coupons, old tax returns, and one thing I thought I'd already burned, the red folder, same one the first letter had come from. I flipped it open, expecting scraps receipts, maybe a faded insurance bill, but tucked inside was a second piece of paper, folded twice. Thinner? No envelope. His handwriting again. Thomas. My hands didn't shake. I read it standing up. Evelyn. If you're reading this, I guess the first letter reached you. There's something I didn't say. I couldn't say it. Not in that one. Nate wasn't just from another woman. He wasn't even supposed to stay. Her name was Rena. She was 18, terrified, and already 2 days postpartum when she showed up on my doorstep. She begged me to give him up for adoption. I couldn't. I thought I could handle it. I told her I'd keep him until she changed her mind. She never did. You were gone on a weekend shift. I told you the baby was ours, an early mistake from before we got serious. I lied. You believed me. And then you raised him. Not as a stepmother, not as a babysitter, but as his only real parent. You were never meant to be his mother, Evelyn. But you became one anyway. I sat on the edge of the bed, that note in my hand, and I didn't feel sadness. I felt scorched. In Buddhism, there's a truth that terrifies most people. There is no fixed self. It sounds cruel, but it's mercy. Because once you realize your identity is not concrete, you are free to choose again. Not every mother is made in a hospital. Not every child is born through you. And not every story ends with reconciliation. Some end with release. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, hair undone, eyes heavy, mouth drawn down from years of holding back. You weren't supposed to be anyone, I whispered, but you became someone anyway. I was never on the birth certificate, never legally adopted him, never got a thank you card or a title in a toast. But I raised him through fevers and flu heartbreak and arrests. I fed him when I couldn't eat. I lied for him when no one else would. I went without so he wouldn't go without. I was invisible, but essential. And now I would be invisible on my own terms. I folded the letter, didn't put it back in the drawer, left it on the kitchen table, not for anyone to find, just so I wouldn't forget that I had loved a child I was never meant to keep, that I had given a life I was never supposed to touch, and that was the most sacred thing I had ever done. But it was done. Now I was no longer Nate's mother. Now I was mine. It began with a notepad, yellow, lined, from the back of a kitchen drawer. No glitter pens, no gold calligraphy, just a list of names that made my heart beat a little less quietly. Claire, my old friend from the ER, the one who brought me soup after my hysterectomy. Denise, the bookstore clerk, who always set aside the latest poetry release with a note, thought of you. Mr. Alvarez, my neighbour, who clears my walkway before I even wake up. Nurse Janet, who once missed her anniversary dinner to cover my hospital shift when I couldn't stop crying in the staff bathroom. None of them shared my blood, but every single one had seen me when I was invisible to the people I called family. That was the new theme, people who saw me. In Buddhist tradition, Sangha is the community that supports your awakening, not your relatives, not your co-workers, your real companions, the ones who say, I see you. I'll sit with you in silence. You don't have to earn this love. That's what I was building. Not a family, a sacred circle. The table had once been used to fold Nate's laundry. Now I spread a sunflower blue cloth across it, lit a candle not for ambiance, but as a kind of altar, proof that something holy could rise even in a house where I once ate shame in silence. I cooked lemon garlic pasta, roasted vegetables with thyme, a peach cobbler I'd always wanted to try, but never had an occasion. Turns out choosing yourself is the occasion. The house smelled like life again. Claire was the first to arrive holding a bottle of red and a grin wide enough to forgive the last 10 years. You look radiant, Ev, she said, eyes lingering on my loose linen blouse, like someone who finally stepped out of someone else's shadow. I laughed, quiet real, not the practiced I'm fine chuckle that motherhood had trained into me. One by one they came, with store-bought pies, with wine, with stories. No curated playlist, no assigned seating, no theme, but truth. It was Denise who raised her glass. To Evelyn, she said, voice steady, for being the kind of woman who reminds the rest of us it's never too late to walk back into your own life. We clinked glasses, and in that moment I felt something ancient loosen in my chest, like a chain falling from a rusted hook. As we passed, plates wiped crumbs with cloth napkins, laughed about bad dates and public flatulence. I remembered something Buddhist master Thich Nhat Hanh once said. Sometimes your joy is the source of your smile, but sometimes your smile can be the source of your joy. I hadn't felt joyful in years, but I smiled that night. Not because I was healed, but because I had finally stopped bleeding for people who never noticed the stains. Later, Nate appeared. He wasn't dressed like the decorated hero from the ceremony. No tailored suit. Just a wrinkled shirt, loose collar, the eyes of a man who'd slept too little and thought too late. He held nothing. No flowers. No apology card. Not even the courage to say Mom right away. Hey, he said. Just that. I didn't smile, didn't invite him in, just stepped aside, barefoot calm. No more photos on the mantel, no tokens of our journey, only quiet furniture, soft light, and the unmistakable hum of a woman who's already moved on. He looked around like he expected a shrine, maybe even hoped for it. Instead, he saw the space he'd erased himself from. You took everything down, he asked. I nodded. I took myself back. He sat. I didn't. I didn't come here to fight. He began. Of course he didn't. Men like Nate never come to fight. They come to manage, to patch, to explain, to realign their image of themselves as good sons. I don't understand what happened. 1 minute everything was fine, and the next, everything was never fine. I interrupted. You just never noticed the leak until the floor collapsed. I set a small box on the table between us. Inside, invoices, screenshots, printouts. Every line item of the ceremony I funded. Nate looked at them like they were a different language. Then I pulled out the letter. Thomas's letter, the one that said he was never mine. I handed it to him. He read it. Twice. Once like it was fiction, then again like it was his own obituary. You knew, he whispered. Now I do, I said. In Buddhism they say, you must accept the truth from whatever source it comes, even if it arrives as ash in your mouth. The truth was, I had raised a man who couldn't stand to see his reflection in me. And the moment I stopped dimming my light to protect him, he called it a betrayal. I didn't think it mattered, Nate muttered. Camille said it would just look better. I didn't think you'd be hurt by it. That's when I laughed. Not cruelly, not even bitterly, just the laugh of a woman who's finally finished being gaslit by her own blood. That's the difference between us, I said. You think intention matters more than impact. You think, I didn't mean to, is a full sentence. He stared down. The silence stretched. Then he whispered, I'm sorry. I stood up, picked up the box, handed it to him. These are yours now. Every dollar, every lie, every story you told without me in it. He hesitated, held the box like it was radioactive. You always said I was your whole world, he murmured. I didn't flinch, didn't cry. You were, I said. And now I'm mine. I walked him to the door. He turned once, looking for softness. There was none left for him. I closed the door before he could ask again. The room was still, the kind of stillness that comes after an exorcism. Not clean, but clear. I made tea, sat on the porch, watched the wind touch the roses I planted with my bare hands, and I realized I hadn't lost my son. I had finally stopped waiting for him to see me, and in doing so, I saw myself again. The next morning I woke to birdsong, no voicemail, no apology, just light streaming through the window like nothing had broken, because nothing had. Not really, not anymore. The worst had already been endured. Smiling through ceremonies I paid for folding napkins in kitchens I wasn't welcome in, being cropped out of photos I'd taken. This was not a tragedy. This was relief. I made eggs, for one. Sprinkled thyme on top, like I was feeding someone precious, because I was. I cleaned the counter, lit a candle not for anyone's memory, but because I liked the way the flame danced in the silverware's reflection. I watered the roses, the ones I planted when Nate left for college. I didn't talk to them. I didn't cry. I just noticed them, alive, like me. The photos were still in the closet, Nate as a baby, his graduation, the birthday cake I baked with 2 missing candles and a flickering hope that he'd remember that I tried. I didn't burn them, didn't display them. I let them rest, unclaimed, unrequired. Because forgiveness doesn't always mean you give it back. Sometimes it just means you stop carrying it. A week later, I hosted one more dinner. Same table, same candle. But this time it was just me. 1 plate, 1 glass of wine, 1 bowl of roasted carrots with sea salt. I raised my glass. To no one. And to everyone. To the women who were asked to sit behind the curtain after they built the whole damn house. To the ones who fed everyone and were told they didn't match the aesthetic. To the ones who stayed silent too long. To the ones who finally walked away not to be heard, but to be whole. I didn't need an ending. I needed a reclamation. So I set the table. Every night. Even if it was just for me. Because in Buddhism they say, when you realize nothing is missing, the whole world belongs to you. That night, I belonged to myself. And I finally knew that was more than enough.